From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
Is God speaking to you right now? I would say yes, because actually the whole idea is that God is speaking to us all the time. Always we are receiving and having offered to us help and guidance and direction. Just as Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is always a way, a truth, a way of life that is always being shown to us in every moment if we simply tune in and dial up that frequency of a higher way that is there. There are essentially two areas of life that we can live from, and we are living in actually, that are important and significant, and they need to be balanced. And of course, one of those is the material, physical side of life, where we get up every day and we go to school or to work, and we're making a living, and we're taking the various steps for survival and security and outer things like that, and going through the ups and downs of a job, of a household, of relationships, and taking care of our well-being, our physical body, with eating and sleeping properly and exercise and all of those kinds of things. So that's one dimension or area of life. And then the other area of life, or side of life, is the spiritual side. And they overlap, of course, and it's where we step into the place of knowing, we're more than a physical form or body. We're more than about what is external. It's about the internal, that we're a spirit, we're a spiritual being. We're about our walk with God, this other part. And so in this other part of our life, we pray, we meditate, we practice the presence, we're into service and helping others, perhaps. We're into spiritual community, where we devote a certain amount of time to deepening our spiritual walk, to evolving and growing spiritually, taking steps to expand and broaden. We're developing a relationship, a deepening relationship with the divine, a partnership, if you will. We're learning to, at times, get quiet and to pause and to listen and to notice and to recognize that God is there. Very important. So, we've been talking about guidance for a couple of weeks, and today is part 3 and really the final part of our 3-part series about exploring avenues of guidance. So we'll continue on. We said that, in the Bible, it's full of communications that take place between God and humanity, and sometimes we read various accounts, the writers depicted as God said this and God said that, whether it was with Abraham or other of the patriarchs and various characters throughout the Bible. And then we have the story of Noah, and Noah is communicated through the rainbow, and we have Moses with the burning bush, and we have a whirlwind that came for Job and his expressions. And then there's Elijah, in which we have the still small voice. So all throughout the Bible. And then, of course, with Jesus Christ, he said, the Father and I are one. And so out of that oneness, there was a recognition that he was always being guided. He was being guided in terms of what he taught and the parables and all of the teachings and all of the things that he modeled. Consistently, he was guiding us into the truth in a way of life. And basically, all of these pieces of the story that add up to really what we are celebrating today, which is Palm Sunday, that he was guided all through the sequence of that drama and that happening and that experience that led up to the crucifixion and the resurrection. Jesus modeled the fact that we are being guided all the time, and he had times where he had to go apart a while and go be quiet and be by himself. He was no different than anyone else, that he had to zero in on that frequency of connecting and get clear and clarity. And so in all the busyness and the hubbub of life that he was dealing with, he too had to go and be quiet at times and really zero in and zone in. And so we've talked about some of the varieties of ways that guidance can come to us, and many have shared as a result of this series stories and experiences that they have had that have been profound and very powerful and meaningful in individuals' lives. Many of you in terms of having been led or guided in a critical moment in your life, or in some way in which you just knew that God, the universe, was really speaking to you in some way. You know, the Hebrews, they were guided by the clouds by day and the fire by night, and many of us, even today, I don't know if some of you, but I know that there are people who have seen formations in the clouds in these day and times, where it might be a face, or it might be a word, or it might be a sentence, or some sign that they get that is in the shape of a cloud that's there for a few moments and then disappears. Came across an interesting story. You all remember Vincent Price, you know, the actor. There was a PBS series that was titled Mystery, and it aired from 1981 to 1989. And Vincent Price, this acclaimed actor, he was involved in hosting this program some, and he happened to be traveling on an airplane, and he was going from Hollywood to New York, I think, to host a show, and he happened to have a window seat in the airplane, and he was sitting there reading a particular book, and then something caused him to just look away from his reading and look out the window. And he was kind of surprised, because what he saw was this brilliant lettering across the sky. And it was a sentence, and what it said was, "Tyrone Power is dead." Tyrone Power was a fellow actor also, and a good friend of Vincent Price. And so after a few seconds, the words disappeared, and the phrase kind of shocked him. There was nobody around him or that looked out the window and saw or commented, so he just said nothing about it. And he even began to doubt, he said, whether or not he had really seen it. And so when he landed, he found and learned the truth that actually Tyrone Power had suddenly died just a couple hours prior. So here he saw actually in the clouds that statement and sentence. For many of us, I think our critical mind will cause us to doubt, you know, is that really possible? Can that really happen? Do these experiences happen? And if it doesn't happen for us, we're not quite sure whether we really buy that or not. There was a Zen Buddhist teaching, it's a story, and this one monk, he was named Chang Tzu, and he and a friend were walking along a riverbank one day. And he said to his friend, he said, "How delightfully the fish are enjoying themselves in the water." And his friend says, "You are not a fish. How do you know whether or not the fish are really enjoying themselves?" And Chang Tzu said to his friend, "You are not me." He said, "How do you know that I do not know that the fish are enjoying themselves?" And so the point is, no two of us are alike, and no two of us have the same level of sensitivities. And God may speak to one in one way, another in another way. And the key is whether we're alert, awake, whether we're listening, but we are being guided all the time. And everything is alive. Everything is speaking to us. And many of those who are very sensitive, and oftentimes Native Americans knew that they talked about the spirit being in everything, including the rocks and what have you. And you know, there was a study that was referred to that was done some years back. Of course, a former CIA interrogations specialist. He attached polygraph electrodes to a plant in his office, and then he watered it to see if it would have some kind of a response. And the needle did move, just like it would have moved if it was a human being. And so that intrigued him, and so he picked up a scissors and was going to go prune it, and then it started moving again. And that really, you know, intrigued him. So what he wondered, the thought, you know, what would the machine do or register if he threatened the plant in some way? And so he no more than had the thought of lighting a match and going under a leaf. He didn't even get to light the match, and just the thought, and the needle started going and moving so that he really got that, wow, there is a communication here that goes on, that there is an intelligence, that there is a capability of exchange and communication, giving and receiving back and forth, that everything is alive, that we communicate with earth, wind, fire, and water, and all of it. In fact, when you talk about water, there was the book that Dr. Emoto wrote about messages from water. Some of you may be familiar, came out a few years ago, and he did some studies in which he was able to show that the properties of water and water crystals, that they reflect consciousness, and that he took pictures of them, and depending on many factors, it would be different types of sounds, different kinds of words and affirmations, but how water actually reflects in a communication consciousness. Now, even things like dogs, there's like a telepathy that takes place also. Studies have been done, and I think Rupert Sheldrake did one of the studies where they realized that from miles away, a dog will, in the exact moment that its master makes the decision that they're going to head for home. They're leaving work and now they're going to head for home. That actually the dog in that moment picks up that thought and gets up from where it may be lying around and goes to the place where it normally greets its master when it comes through the door. But that actually occurred at the moment in which the master makes that kind of decision. That there is that kind of level of communication going on with all of life. It's important for us to know, because the more we know that, then the more we're willing to be attuned and really be open and receptive to all the signs and signals, all the ways in which life is speaking to us, helping us, assisting us in moving forward, being happy, fulfilled beings. And some people follow, guidance that comes, and others ignore it. It just is. I mean, some receive guidance and they don't realize they're getting it, or they simply ignore it. In the news for weeks, we've heard about the Malaysia flight that was hijacked and went down in the ocean. They're trying to find it and following the beeps and all of that. In the news, there was a local Houstonian man. He was supposed to have been on that flight. His name was Greg Candelaria, a 57-year-old guy. He was booked on that Malaysia airline flight 370. But he canceled at the last minute, and he was actually supposed to speak at a sales conference for his company, IBM. But he said he just came down, just was too exhausted from other travel and decided not to go, and he felt like that was divine intervention, that he had really been guided. It's interesting, I don't know if you're aware, but even, the 4 planes that went down in the 9/11 disaster, there really had to be some guidance going on for a number of people there and being guided not to be on one of those flights, because it is reported that 79%, actually 80% of the seats on those 4 planes involved in the attacks of 9/11 were unoccupied. 80% of the seats of 4 planes. That the American Airlines Flight 11 had room for 168 more passengers than were in seats. That United Flight 175 had only 65 of 175 seats occupied. That the Boeing 757 that crashed in Pennsylvania was 80% unoccupied. It's interesting. So we have to ask, it brings up questions for us as well. Why do some receive intuitions and others don't? Why do some listen and follow and others don't? It's an individual dynamic. Some study has revealed that basically 60% of Americans believe in an extrasensory perception and intuition. So there's still 40% that don't believe in intuition, aren't inclined to follow it, don't listen to it. Not everyone has to have an apple fall on their head in order to get the message, as Sir Isaac Newton did in discovering gravity. It's there. And some people, receive what is referred to as an omen. Sometimes we use the word omen. Well, it just has to do with the idea that sometimes we're receiving a warning or we're getting a signal about something in the future. And that's how we use kind of the word omen. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing, but, in terms of guidance in the future, I remember in my first ministry, I was there for 7 years in Olympia, Washington, and I was happy there. I loved the work, loved the community. I was on the radio station weekly, and everything was going great. We had built the ministry many times from what I had inherited it to be, and had several building projects, everything. And I was on a member of the golf club, the country club there in Olympia, and they had a clergy arrangement, membership rate. So for $50, I could play all the golf I wanted or had time to play. And this was about the last year and a half that I was there, that they came and offered that to me. The country club did. And anyway, what I'm all leading up to is about 6.5 years into my 7 years there at that ministry. It was a Monday, my day off. I was golfing alone. I was out on a fairway. I remember exactly where I was on the golf course. It was beautiful. It was sunny. Mount Rainier was over there. And I just paused. Something told me to pause and look around and take this in, because it's not going to last forever. You're not going to be here too much longer. I really got that. I'm not going to be here very much longer. And 6 months later, I was on my way to Houston. But I still remember that moment where I got like an omen or a signal that, you know, enjoy this. This is the way it is now, but it's not always going to be, and you're going to be headed somewhere else. There's a story I came across of a pastor that a true story, he was looking at taking a ministry in Kentucky. It was a small church. And so he thought, okay, well, I'll go, you know, visit the church, as would be wise to do. And so he actually drove up to outside the church, pulled up to the curb, got out of his car, and as he was walking toward the front door, there was this all black bird that dove at him. And like wanting to do him harm, and he had to duck out of the way. And so, you know, he wasn't too sure what that was about, on his way to the doorway of the church. And then when he got inside, he was greeted by the deacon, or the head guy on the board of the directors, and he was dressed all in black, and he had kind of a frown on his face. And the minister said, I put the two together, and I didn't take that church. So, you know, always we're getting signals. Some omens can come in a dream, and we're being told something about the future, might be warning us. Some of you are familiar with Rennell Wallace. Rennell Wallace was a lady who wrote the book, The Burning Within. She's been here a couple times to speak. She had serious burns all over her body and her face, and had a story to tell about recovering from it, but she told the story of how that all happened. And basically, she had a dream the night before the crash of a small airplane, single prop, that her husband was a pilot, and they were living in Alaska, and it was a short flight, but the weather was questionable, and she had the dream, and she pleaded with her husband that they not go, that they take a car, that they'd just whatever, and he really just finally convinced her to just, it'd be okay. So she got in, and they did crash, and she had, the whole dream was fulfilled. And she went on to tell us the inspiration of how she has moved forward from that point in time in her life. But there are omens that come in a dream. President Lincoln had a dream 3 days prior to his assassination, and he shared that dream with his wife and some of his friends. And actually, there was a fellow named Ward Layman, one of his friends who happened to be present at the time that he shared this story with his wife, and he was able to share and wrote down what the president said, and this is what he heard President Lincoln say. He said, "About 10 days ago, I retired very late. I had been up waiting for important dispatches from the front. I could not have been long in bed when I fell into a slumber, for I was weary. I soon began to dream. There seemed to be a death-like stillness about me. Then I heard subdued sobs, as if a number of people were weeping. I thought I left my bed and wandered downstairs. There the silence was broken by the same pitiful sobbing, but the mourners were invisible. I went from room to room. No living person was in sight, but the same mournful sounds of distress met me as I passed along. I saw light in all the rooms. Every object was familiar to me, but where were all the people who were grieving as if their hearts would break? I was puzzled and alarmed. What could be the meaning of all of this? Determined to find the cause of a state of things so mysterious and so shocking, I kept on until I arrived at the east room, which I entered. There I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a coffin, on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards. And there was a throng of people, gazing mournfully upon the corpse, whose face was covered, others weeping pitifully. "Who is dead in the White House?" I demanded of one of the soldiers. "The president," was his answer. "He was killed by an assassin." Then came a loud burst of grief from the crowd, which woke me from my dream. I have been strangely annoyed by it ever since. Abraham Lincoln. Interesting phenomena, ways in which, I still remember my mother telling me how she dreamt that the farmhouse that she had grown up in and lived in as a young girl, and they were renting out now, the family was, had burned down. She dreamt it burned down, and that early in the morning she received a call that got her out of bed, and she knew the call was to tell her that the house had burned down, which it was. I still remember that, sticks with me. But on a brighter note, there are good things, inspiration and what have you, that come in dreams as well, kind of an omen of something to come. Paul McCartney of the Beatles, you all know Paul, okay? He had a melody of a song that came to him in a dream. And when he woke up, he attributed the melody to something that maybe he had heard, memory of some tune from his childhood. But as he stuck with it, he realized actually it was original. And so he added lyrics to it and came up with the song Yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away, right? You don't want me to sing any further and destroy the song Yesterday. But anyway, we have to realize, that we can be tuned in and connected with many dimensions. In my Father's house are many rooms, and there are different rooms and dimensions that we can be connecting to. And just knowing that it can be a key. And we said today is Palm Sunday, and Jesus knew and was guided in so many facets of what went on in that period of days leading up to the crucifixion. Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him, even perhaps before Judas knew that he was going to succumb to it. Jesus knew that Peter was going to deny him 3 times. And, he told the disciples that all of them would stumble spiritually in some way that night because of him, related to him in some way. And Peter, in hearing that, being told to all the disciples, he jumps up and he says, "Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble." That was what Peter said in the passage. And Jesus says to him, "This night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And later that night, after Peter had actually denied 3 different instances, which are all recorded there, all of a sudden a rooster crows. And when he heard it, he remembered what Jesus said, and Peter wept. Jesus said to the Jews, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Of course, many of them thought he was talking about an external temple, but he was talking about his physical body. He knew what was ahead for him. He knew. And when Judas betrayed Jesus, they came and, it says, laid hands on him and took him. Essentially, they were kind of just maybe, tying his hands up or whatever, but they were coming to take him. And in that kind of shuffle, one of the followers of Jesus pulled out his sword and sliced off the ear of the servant of the high priest that was there. And Jesus said, of course, "Put your sword away. If you live by the sword, you perish by the sword." And then the next thing he says, "Do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels. In other words, Jesus was saying, you think I can't get out of this? You know, I don't need you swinging a sword around. Do you not know that I could pray right now to my Father and he could provide 12 legions of angels? Interesting statement there. You know, he knew that he was being guided. It wasn't an easy path that he was on, you know. Even at one point said, you know, take this cup from me. And Jesus sent 2 disciples, you know, to a specific village, to a specific location, to find a specific donkey and colt that would be tied there, and told them to bring them. And so he knew where they would be and when. And of course, Jesus continues to guide us, you know, and through the many teachings that are there and the parables that he shared. But we also have to know that Jesus is with us also in spirit. That we can tune in many dimensions, because there are many dimensions from which we live. And so people have heard the voice of Jesus. They have claimed to have felt his presence. And I have met people who have said they have actually had Jesus materialize in front of them. And I do not rule out any of those as a possibility that is to happen. And one of the most important passages that we can not overlook in this whole matter of guidance is when Jesus was coming near the end of his ministry, and it was during this particular week, these final days. There were several things that he said, and it's all recorded in the chapter 14 of the Gospel of John. Very important messages about the idea that even though he was leaving, we will continue to be guided. And what he said are, and here's several things that he said, starting with, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I go to the Father. And whatever you ask in my name, in that consciousness, I will do it, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Guidance right there. Then he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another counselor to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, and he dwells with you and will be in you. And he says, these things I have spoken to you while I am still with you. But the counselor, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all that I've said to you. The counselor, the teacher, couldn't be any clearer. The continual guidance that we receive. So we all have access to the Spirit of Christ, the Holy Spirit, this counselor that is there with you, teaching you, guiding you, helping you along your journey, along your path. And so what I leave with you is just the recognition that in a heightened way, to know that you are being guided all the time. To remember that, yeah, you do your part. There is prayer, there is meditating, there is both talking to the divine as a presence, and also moments of just being quiet and listening. There is the need for you to actually ask and seek and knock at the door of all knowingness. It is required, it's part of our role. And to realize we're never alone, that every moment can be a sacred communication from on high that is helping to take us through whatever we're facing, or just to make any day more full and rich and whole and complete. So may you all be guided always, and know that is your truth. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.
Are you currently church shopping, looking for that right church for you or your family? Perhaps you've been looking and been turned off by organized religion. It happens. Let me suggest you try Unity Church. We are a positive, practical, progressive approach to Christianity. Many who have found us have said, I didn't know there was a church that taught what I always believed. Let's be honest, people shop for clothes, good restaurants, and the right church that feeds them spiritually. If you're seeking a spiritual truth beyond tradition, try Unity Church. Come join us.